Welcome. Today we delve into a story of courage, precision, and the extraordinary resilience of men facing the unknown in wartime skies. This is the tale of a daring bombing mission over North Africa, where every second counted and the limits of human and mechanical endurance were pushed to the brink. But what if I told you that within just minutes of takeoff, the crew of the famous Boeing B-17 All-American 3 would encounter an event so bizarre and devastating that it would challenge everything we thought possible about flight, physics, and resilience. Imagine a plane meticulously prepared, its crew confident in their training, only to be caught in a collision that defied logic. How could such an incident happen in clear, calm skies? Could their aircraft withstand the impact? And what secrets does this collision hold about the true limits of engineering and human endurance? Did the resilience of these seasoned veterans mean they would survive the unthinkable? Were their aircraft's incredible design and the crew's unwavering spirit enough to withstand the chaos? Why was this mission, so carefully planned, destined to become one of the most scrutinized events in aviation history? And what mysteries lie hidden in the aftermath of this collision, waiting to be uncovered? In this video, we will trace every step of their journey, from meticulous pre-flight checks at Biskra Airfield to the moment of impact, and peel back the layers of truth behind one of the most astonishing aviation incidents ever recorded. We will sift fact from fiction, examine the resilience of both men and machines, and reveal a story that will challenge your understanding of courage and engineering under fire. The most extraordinary part of this story starts right now, as we uncover what truly happened when a seemingly flawless flight turned into an event that would test the very boundaries of resilience, physics, and human resolve. Let's begin. Resilience of a seasoned veteran, his gaze steady and focused as he meticulously checked every lever, dial, and switch. The desert air was crisp and still, a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon unfold just hours later. The early morning light cast a pale glow over Biskra Airfield in Algeria, illuminating the rugged terrain that stretched endlessly beyond the runway, silent witnesses to the events about to take place. This particular day, February 1st, was to be unlike any other, marked not only by the clarity of the skies, but also by the extraordinary circumstances that would soon become etched into the annals of aviation history. The atmosphere was tinged with a sense of anticipation and purpose. As the crew of the formidable Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, known as All-American 3, prepared for yet another daring mission deep into enemy territory. The crew, seasoned men who had flown countless sorties together, were well aware of the peril that lay ahead. Yet they carried a calm confidence born of experience and indomitable spirit. In the quiet moments before takeoff, Lieutenant Kendrick Robertson Bragg, at the age of 25, ran his hands with practiced ease along the control surfaces of the aircraft, carefully inspecting each component as part of his routine pre-flight check. His demeanor reflected the calm determination of a man who had faced danger before and emerged unscathed, a trait that had become second nature by this point in the war. His quiet confidence was a testament to his training and to the resilience of the men he commanded, all of whom understood that their mission was vital to the broader effort against the Axis powers. As the engines roared to life under the dawn's early light, the vibrations sent through the ground into the surrounding sands signaled the beginning of a journey that would test their limits and challenge the very laws of physics. The powerful radial engines of their B-17, aptly named All-American 3, echoed across the airfield, trembling the desert in a symphony of mechanical prowess. The aircraft, ready to take on the treacherous skies, was a marvel of American engineering, a flying fortress designed to withstand the brutality of war while carrying its deadly payload. The date was February 1st, and the weather conditions were nothing short of ideal for a bombing operation. Gone were the usual sandstorms, which often obscured visibility and complicated flight plans. Instead, a light wind swept across the airfield, barely disturbing the clear expanse of the sky. Visibility was near perfect, with the horizon stretching infinitely into the blue, offering the crew an unobstructed view of their target and a clear path back home. Such conditions were rare for this region, and the crew understood the importance of seizing this window of opportunity. During the briefing at 4 o'clock in the morning, the operations officer had emphasized the importance of precision and coordination, knowing that the success of the mission depended on flawless execution. Kendrick Bragg, ever meticulous, ran his hands along the control surfaces, ensuring everything was in order. His experience and calm demeanor instilled confidence in the entire crew, setting the tone for the mission ahead. As the aircraft taxied onto the runway, ready to lift into the morning sky, the crew members took their positions with quiet resolve. Each man understood that he was about to undertake a perilous journey into enemy territory, risking his life for the greater good. Little did they know that within minutes of takeoff, their lives would be forever changed by an incident so extraordinary that it would become one of the most scrutinized and studied events in the history of combat aviation. Their mission was set, and with a powerful roar, All-American 3 ascended into the clear February sky over Tunisia and Algeria. The crew's focus was unwavering, their training guiding their actions as they flew into the unknown, unaware that they were about to become witnesses to a collision that defied all logic, physics, and expectation. A collision that would test the boundaries of human resilience and engineering ingenuity in the most dramatic way imaginable. The Mediterranean coast was vital to the Axis war effort, and destroying these key logistical hubs could significantly hamper their ability to sustain their military operations across North Africa and beyond. Time and again, the brave men of the 8th Air Force had demonstrated remarkable resilience and unwavering determination, even when faced with the perilous realities of aerial combat and the deadly defenses defending their targets. This particular mission had been carefully plotted, with meticulous attention paid to the details that could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. The crew of the formidable B-17F, bearing the proud designation of All-American 3, prepared themselves not just as a team of skilled aviators, but as a close-knit family driven by a shared sense of duty and purpose. The aircraft itself was a testament to American ingenuity and manufacturing prowess. Crafted at the Boeing plant in Seattle and flown across the Atlantic during Operation Bolero, which was a massive logistical effort designed to reinforce Allied forces in Europe. Since its arrival into the theater of operations, All-American 3 had been meticulously maintained, and her crew knew her intimately. Joe C. James, the aircraft's seasoned flight engineer, was intimately familiar with every rivet and panel, every peculiar sound she emitted, a testament to his mechanical intuition and expertise. Every bolt, every wire, every jet of engine noise was a language he understood, and his confident affirmation that the aircraft was ready was a reassurance to everyone on board. The team assembled early in the morning, a diverse group representing the broad spectrum of American society, united by common goals and rigorous training. Second Lieutenant Godfrey Engel, Jr., the co-pilot, hailed from a prominent banking family in Connecticut, bringing a calculated calmness to the cockpit. Harry C. Newsel, the navigator, had left his engineering studies at the University of Minnesota to enlist, bringing exceptional technical knowledge to the mission. Ralph Burbridge, the bombardier, had already earned his wings prior to Pearl Harbor, making him one of the most experienced crew members despite his young age of 23. His expertise honed through countless missions and training exercises. Among the enlisted men were specialists whose skills were equally vital. Staff Sergeant Paul A. Galloway, radio operator, had mastered the finicky liaison radios, crucial for coordination among formations, ensuring reliable communication even under intense enemy fire. The waist gunners, Staff Sergeant Michael Zuck and Sergeant Elton Condor, had meticulously checked their ammunition and weapons, preparing their Browning .50 caliber machine guns for the inevitable defensive actions. Condor's last-minute addition to the crew, replacing an ill crew member from the 341st Squadron, underscored the ongoing sacrifices and adaptability demanded by war. Finally, there was Staff Sergeant Sam T. Sarapoulos, known within the squadron as Lonesome Sam, a nickname earned after the mission, but which, at this point, reflected a stoic acceptance of his role as the bomber's most vulnerable defender. He settled into his isolated position, embodying a resolve that came from a deep understanding of the dangers they faced and the critical nature of his duties. The 97th Bombardment Group, a pioneering unit in American strategic bombing, had already made history by being the first heavy bomber group to see combat in Europe. launching their initial mission from England on August the 17th of the year 1942. Since then, they had been redeployed to North Africa, supporting Operation Torch, which aimed to push Axis forces out of the continent and secure vital strategic points for the Allied war effort. The cost had been heavy. Aircraft shot down, crews lost in the perilous skies to enemy fighters, anti-aircraft flak, and the relentless mathematics of strategic bombing, which often meant risking everything to achieve their objectives. Today's target, the port facilities at Tunis and Bizerto, represented more than mere logistical hubs. They were lifelines that sustained the Axis military campaign in North Africa. The destruction or disruption of these critical nodes could cripple the supply chain, outfitting and fueling Axis troops, transporting weapons, and reinforcing their lines of communication and logistics. Every ton of supplies that reached North Africa was a testament to their resilience, but also a potential Achilles heel that Allied air power sought to exploit with precision and unwavering resolve. In the face of such daunting targets, the men aboard the All-American III knew that their mission was crucial. It was a test not only of their aircraft's formidable capabilities, but also of their own grit, training, and collective willpower. The stakes could not have been higher. Failure meant not only the loss of equipment and personnel, but potentially the compromising of the entire Allied strategy in this pivotal theater of war. Yet as the crew prepared for takeoff, their spirits remained steadfast, driven by a fierce determination to succeed against overwhelming odds, knowing that the outcome of their efforts could influence the course of history. Certainly. Here's a deeply reworked, expanded, and polished version of your original text, maintaining its core content and meaning while enhancing its narrative flow, detail, and readability. The strategic ports in North Africa had long been vital arteries for Axis supply lines, their control representing a significant obstacle to Allied progress in the region. Each successful bombing mission against these key hubs gradually tightened the chokehold, inching the Allies closer to liberating the continent from Axis dominance and opening a crucial pathway into southern Europe. As the aircraft assembled over the vast expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, their formation moved with the practiced grace of a precisely choreographed ballet, each plane perfectly aligned with the others in a display of aerial discipline and coordination. The formation consisted of 12 formidable B-17 flying fortresses belonging to the 414th Bombardment Squadron. These aircraft arranged themselves into a distinctive defensive box pattern, a three-dimensional configuration carefully designed to maximize the overlapping fields of fire from their numerous 50-caliber machine guns. Such formations were not merely about appearance, but represented a sophisticated defensive strategy intended to provide maximum protection against enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire. All-American III, a veteran aircraft of the squadron, positioned herself strategically on the right wing of the lead bomber, the aircraft aptly named Flaming, which was commanded by Major Robert Coulter, the squadron's operations officer. The tension in the air was palpable, primarily due to the absence of fighter escorts expected to weave protective patterns around their formation. These fighters, the P-38 Lightnings, which normally flitted like shadows overhead, were grounded due to mechanical issues, an unforeseen setback that cast a shadow over the mission's safety. Without their fighters, the bombers would have to depend solely on their own guns and the long-held military doctrine of mutual protection, an untested doctrine in the face of determined and aggressive enemy fighters. At 20,000 feet above the earth, the bitter cold had set in, causing the temperature to plunge to a chilling -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice crystals quickly formed on the aircraft's windows, and the crew's breath froze inside their oxygen masks, necessitating constant manual intervention to clear away the accumulating frost that threatened to block vital airflow and impair their breathing. The crew's flight suits, a marvel of American ingenuity, electrically heated to provide some relief against the Arctic temperatures, struggled in this relentless environment, working against the hostile conditions at these extreme altitudes. Many returning from missions bore frostbite akin to their combat wounds, a testament to the unforgiving nature of high-altitude warfare. As the aircraft approached their target, Bombardier Ralph Burbridge radioed the sighting through the intercom, announcing that Tunis had come into view through the scattered clouds below, a sprawling target of strategic importance. The port of Tunis was a hive of activity, ships bustling with unloading operations, trains lined up on sidings ready to carry supplies deeper into the territory, and trucks streaming toward the front line. Here, the Africa Corps was making its final, desperate stand against the advancing forces of Montgomery's 8th Army and Patton's 2nd Corps, both pushing relentlessly toward victory. The upcoming bomb run demanded absolute precision. The aircraft had to hold a steady level course for 3 minutes, a feat of unwavering focus and discipline. The pilots held their course, refusing to deviate or engage in evasive maneuvers, while Burbridge meticulously synchronized his Norden bomb sight with the target beneath the clouds. This secret device, which the Americans guarded with the utmost care, was removed from the aircraft after every mission, a testament to its importance. Its complex system of gyroscopes and mechanical calculations determined the precise moment to release the bombs, ensuring accuracy in an environment where even a slight miscalculation could spell disaster. Suddenly, the warning about incoming flak was unnecessary. The black puffs blossoming around the aircraft served as stark evidence of the enemy's anti-aircraft defenses. The burst represented countless shrapnel fragments, each one a deadly projectile seeking the vulnerable aluminum hulls and flesh of the crew. The formidable German 88mm guns, originally designed as anti-tank weapons, but which had proven devastatingly effective against formations like theirs, roared to life. Fused to explode at a predetermined altitude, these shells created a lethal box of death, forcing the bombers to fly through a deadly gauntlet. "Bombs away," Burbridge announced calmly. And in that moment, all American 3 lurched upward as the bombs, each weighing 4,000 pounds of high explosives, detached from her bomb bay. The silence of anticipation was broken by the thunderous impact below as the ordnance struck its targets. Direct hits on the warehouses ignited fires that roared upward. Secondary explosions from stored ammunition added to the chaos, and ships in the harbor listed dangerously, their masts and hulls shuddering under the attack. It was perhaps their most successful strike yet, a testament to the skill and precision of the crew. Yet this sense of triumph was fleeting. As the dramatic clash unfolded over the battlefield, the fighters suddenly appeared, slicing through the sky with determined intent. 2 Messerschmitt Bf-109 G4 fighters emerged swiftly from their position in the sun's glare, rapidly descending toward their targets. These aircraft, often referred to as 109s among pilots and military personnel, moved with precision and lethal purpose, their dark silhouettes contrasting sharply against the bright sky. The warning sirens and alert calls from multiple gunners erupted simultaneously, signaling the imminent danger to the American bomber formation below. From their vantage points, the German pilots knew well from bitter experience that the defensive firepower of the B-7 bombers was notably weakest when approached from the front. Specifically, the nose-mounted guns struggled to depress enough to hit low-flying attackers, and the top turret, mounted high above the fuselage, was limited in its ability to track fast-moving targets coming head-on. This vulnerability had been drilled into them through countless encounters, and they capitalized on this knowledge now as the 2 fighters dove into the attack run. The first attacker, piloted by a seasoned ace, Oberleutnant Julius Miemberg of the 11th Jagdbombergeschwader II, was temporarily attached to the Jagdgeschwader 53 unit, a designation that highlighted his deployment. Miemberg was already celebrated for his combat prowess, and now he engaged with deadly focus. At a distance of about 500 yards, he opened fire with a flurry of deadly projectiles. His aircraft's armament included 20mm cannons and 13mm machine guns, which flashed dramatically as they released their destructive payload along the length of his wings. The intensity of his fire was such that the initial target, a lead bomber in the formation, shuddered visibly under the impact. Bits of metal, aluminum siding, and other debris peeled away from the bomber in scattered streams, like confetti thrown in celebration or chaos. Meanwhile, the second German fighter, flown by Feldwebel Erich Patzia of the 6th Jagdbombergeschwader 53, set its sights on all 3 American aircraft. Patzia was relatively new to combat, a novice with only 16 confirmed victories to his name. Despite his limited experience, He had already earned the prestigious Ehrenpokal der Luftwaffe, a goblet symbolizing excellence and success among fighter pilots, an accolade that underscored his skill and potential. He knew precisely where to aim in order to cause maximum damage. The engines, the pilot's cockpits, and the wing roots that house vital fuel tanks. However, for reasons that remain a matter of historical debate, something went awry during this crucial moment. As Paxia approached the bomber at about 300 yards, he initiated what was usually a standard escape maneuver, a half-roll intended to take him beneath the bomber, out of its defensive firing arcs. This move, which he had practiced dozens of times before, was designed to allow him to slip away quickly and avoid return fire. But this time, either because of overconfidence, distraction by the target, a mechanical malfunction, or some combination of these factors, Paxia either delayed or failed to initiate the maneuver altogether. Or perhaps, in a stark and tragic twist of fate, Paxia was already dead before he could act. Ralph Burbridge, one of the bomber crew members, would later recall that he had Paxia in his sights, watching him approach directly head-on through the fighter's windscreen. At that moment, the face of the German pilot was clear, and Burbridge vividly remembered seeing him incoming. Then suddenly, the top turret gunner, James, opened fire. The turret, manned by Technical Sergeant Joe James, lashed out with a burst of twin .50 caliber machine gun fire aimed directly at the cockpit of the attacking fighter. And that burst changed everything. The combat veteran James had trained extensively in the use of his turret guns, and now he had his target, one of the enemy fighters. The first shot struck true, and perhaps more than one round was fired in rapid succession. The effect was immediate. Paxia's aircraft was hit. Whether he was instantly killed or simply incapacitated by the gunfire, the consequence was the same. The fighter, weighing over 2,000 pounds and traveling at speeds exceeding 350 miles per hour, suddenly became uncontrollable. In the brief span of less than 2 seconds, chaos erupted. The German fighter, now unresponsive to pilot commands, veered wildly out of control. Its left wing, compromised by the gunfire, sliced through the fuselage of the bomber just behind the waist guns and the tail section, carving a diagonal gash across the aircraft. This wound extended from the base of the vertical stabilizer all the way across to the left horizontal stabilizer, which was sheared off entirely, leaving the aircraft severely damaged and bleeding in mid-flight. Harry Newell, the bomber's navigator, provided a profoundly visceral description of the aftermath in a report written to his brother shortly after the collision between the aircraft and the attacking fighter was nothing short of extraordinary, challenging every known principle of physics and aerodynamics. The German Bf-109 fighter, a formidable piece of combat engineering, was hurtling through the sky at a relative velocity approaching 400 miles per hour. Intuitively, one might have expected that such a rapid impact, especially involving the fighter's wing striking the target aircraft, would have completely sliced the B-17 bomber in half. Yet, defying all rational expectations, the wing narrowly missed the aircraft's main structural spars on the right side of the fuselage by mere inches. This incident, which many of the crew members would later describe as almost divine intervention, prevented catastrophic destruction. Instead, by what seemed to be a stroke of improbable chance, the impact left the fighter's wing hanging perilously close to the core of the aircraft's skeleton, where it had the potential to cause devastating damage. The tail section, which contained Staff Sergeant Sam Saralis, remained attached to the fuselage by what investigators would later characterize as the bare minimum of structural linkage, just enough to maintain a fragile semblance of control. The German fighter, unable to sustain its structural integrity under the violent collision, disintegrated almost immediately. Its wing, torn off from the main body during impact, remained embedded in the side of the B-17's fuselage as a grotesque reminder of the chaos. Meanwhile, the fighter's engine and forward fuselage destabilized, tumbling away in a fiery explosion that erupted in a cloud of flames and debris. The tail section, with its distinctive yellow nose and prominent black crosses, spun away from the chaos beneath it, twirling like a maple seed caught in a swirling gust of wind, descending toward the stark, sun-baked desert below. Within that blazing wreckage, hidden from immediate view, was Feldwebel Erich Patzia, born on the 7th of May in 1918 in Germany. Little did he know that his sudden death would later be recognized as part of one of the most extraordinary survival stories in aviation history. He was posthumously awarded for his brave effort on March the 1st, 1943, but at the moment of impact, he and the rest of the crew had no idea that they were witnessing the creation of an almost mythical tale of resilience and endurance. Meanwhile, the crew of the battered aircraft had no time to dwell on the fate of their attacker. They were too consumed with their own dire predicament. The very laws of physics and aerodynamics seemed to conspire against them as they faced what appeared to be insurmountable odds. Pilot to crew, Bragg's voice broke through the chaos over the intercom system, calm and steady, masking the tumult of his own physical and mental strain. "Check in. Is everybody okay?" His tone betrayed none of the panic that might have been expected given the sudden chaos unfolding around them. The control cables that operated the aircraft's tail surfaces, the elevator, which governs pitch, and the rudder, responsible for yaw, had been severed or badly damaged, rendering the crew unable to steer or stabilize their aircraft effectively. Without these crucial control surfaces, the plane's tendency was to nosedive into what pilots call a graveyard spiral, a spiraling descent from which rescue is almost impossible without functional controls. Slowly, one by one, each crew member responded over the intercom, confirming their safety. Miraculously, despite the violent collision, no one aboard the bomber had been injured in that initial impact. However, the situation grew even more dire when it was time for the tail gunner to report in. The silence that followed was deafening. No response came. "Sam, you okay back there?" Bragg called again, concern creeping into his voice. Still, no reply. The intercom line to the tail section had been severed, cutting off direct communication. Yet through a jagged hole in the fuselage, created by the impact, the crew in the waist section could glimpse movement in the tail. They could see that Staff Sergeant Ceralis was alive, but trapped inside a tail section that was now completely detached from the rest of the aircraft and swinging wildly in the air currents, like a kite caught in a hurricane, in the grip of the turbulent slipstream. The full extent of the damage was staggering and almost incomprehensible. The left horizontal stabilizer, the large wing-like surface responsible for maintaining the aircraft's level flight, had been completely sheared off by the enemy's wing during impact. As a result, the elevator on that side had vanished, leaving the aircraft without essential control capability. The vertical stabilizer, the tall, upright tail fin, was heavily gored, with a massive gash cut through its base, further compromising the aircraft's stability and control. The fuselage itself was open like a tin can, its structural integrity compromised from the tail gunner's position forward to just behind the waist gun windows. Strands of control cables hung loosely in the airflow, their loose ends fluttering among the most iconic images captured during the chaos of war. One scene stands out vividly in the collective memory: the battered but stubborn wreckage of the aircraft known as All-American 3. In this haunting photograph, the tail section of the plane is starkly visible, noticeably displaced from its normal alignment, tilted at an ominous angle that suggests imminent structural failure. The visual evidence of damage is unmistakable. There's a jagged diagonal tear slicing across the fuselage, clearly visible in the image, and the remnants of the tail stabilizer are entirely missing. Despite this severe visible trauma, the aircraft appears to maintain level flight, a situation that defies the fundamental laws of aerodynamics and physics, instantly capturing the imagination and concern of everyone witnessing the scene. It's almost as if the plane is defying gravity by sheer willpower alone, creating an almost surreal tableau. In the midst of this chaos, someone's voice crackles through the intercom, a voice filled with a mix of anxiety and hope, possibly the voice of a pilot or crew member trying to reassure or command amidst the mounting crisis. The entire tail section is on the brink of detaching completely, a fact that seems impossible given the aircraft's apparent stability, but is, in reality, an imminent threat. Co-pilot Godfrey Engel Jr., working alongside Major Bragg, was desperately and frantically trying to manipulate what control inputs they still had available in a bid to keep the aircraft from breaking apart entirely. With the typical control surfaces, ailerons, elevators, and rudders, damaged or rendered useless, the crew had to resort to improvisation and ingenuity. The aircraft's autopilot system, which was linked to the Nordon bomb site, presented an unusual but crucial tool. Unlike conventional systems that relied solely on mechanical linkages, this autopilot used electrical servos, which could be engaged selectively to help stabilize the aircraft. By engaging it partially, Bragg and Engel could make micro-adjustments aimed at maintaining some semblance of steady flight, despite the overwhelming damage. To counteract the aircraft's tendency to yaw and spin uncontrollably, the crew employed a daring and unconventional technique: differential engine power. They carefully adjusted the throttle settings, running the engines on the left side at slightly higher power than those on the right. This delicate balance helped counteract the yawing motion, steering the aircraft back toward a semblance of level flight. Every control input had to be gentle, deliberate, and measured, because applying too much force risked tearing the aircraft's fragile structure apart completely. Any sudden or excessive maneuver could turn a desperate flight into a catastrophic disintegration. Meanwhile, Major Coulter's voice crackled over the radio, filled with a mixture of resolve and concern. His words came through from the flaming wreckage of the Mai, another aircraft that had been grievously damaged in a recent fighter attack, yet he managed to get out a vital message. "Can you make it home?" It was a question that encapsulated the desperation and hope that defined that moment in the battle-scarred skies. Bragg, checking the aircraft's vital signs, looked at the gauges with a cautious eye. He noted that there were no significant fuel leaks, and the tanks still indicated adequate reserves. An unexpected but fortunate sign amid the chaos. All four engines continued to hum steadily, with temperatures and pressures within normal ranges, and the electrical systems, crucial for the remaining control systems and instrumentation, remained functional. At that moment, the only major issue was the aircraft's severely compromised structure, missing a substantial chunk of its fuselage, yet somehow still flying. To Bragg, it was almost a trivial detail in the face of the larger battle to keep it flying and to reach safety. Inside the nearly severed tail section, Staff Sergeant Sam T. Sarras faced an almost unimaginable decision, one that would freeze most men in fear or paralyze them with indecision. The damaged tail was moving independently of the rest of the aircraft, sometimes shifting several feet out of alignment, creating a terrifying and unstable situation. The structure was so compromised that each movement placed additional stress on the remaining connections, fragile and overstressed from the damage sustained. Any sudden maneuver, or even a strong turbulence, risked causing the tail to tear loose entirely, sending 5 tons of aluminum and metal hurtling into the void below. But Sarras made his choice. With unwavering resolve, he gathered his parachute and his equipment, and in a move that would later become legendary among those who witnessed it, he also grabbed a borrowed jacket, an artifact of camaraderie and bravery belonging to Lieutenant Bragg. Without hesitation, he began what would be the most perilous 30-foot crawl of his life, navigating through the chaos of the damaged fuselage. The scene within the aircraft was nothing short of apocalyptic. Daylight streamed through jagged tears in the metal skin, illuminating the chaos inside. The howling wind rushed through the gaps, creating a relentless maelstrom of debris, spent shell casings, loose equipment, fragments of the German fighter that later he would recall with a sense of calm, as composed as could be, dragging his gear behind him with deliberate, steady movements. When he finally reached us, the first thing he did was hand over the jacket of the lieutenant, the bomber's tail gunner, to me, and say in a quiet but firm voice, "Make sure the skipper gets this back. He might need it when we land." What should have been a journey lasting just a matter of seconds had, due to the tense circumstances, stretched into nearly 10 minutes. Yet despite the delay, Sam Sarras had managed to reach us safely. Now, all 10 members of our crew were gathered in the forward section of the aircraft, ready to jump out if circumstances demanded it, prepared for the possibility of bailing out into the hostile skies below. The bomber formation faced an agonizing decision. According to standard military procedures, aircraft that had sustained damage and could no longer maintain the necessary speed were supposed to be left behind to avoid compromising the entire formation. The logic was that slow, wounded aircraft could become easy targets and force the others to reduce their velocity, making them more vulnerable to enemy fighters. However, the crew of the 414th Squadron refused to abandon their fellow American aircraft, known colloquially as All-American 3. Instead, the formation tightly closed ranks around the battered bomber, forming a protective shield through their collective firepower. This act of loyalty and camaraderie came at a cost. It meant flying more slowly, risking increased exposure to enemy fighters, and prolonging their stay in enemy-controlled airspace, precious minutes that could mean the difference between life and death. These men had trained together extensively, sharing hardships and enduring the rigors of their North African-based life, where danger was a constant companion. They had experienced losses and shared grief over fallen comrades, so their loyalty to each other was rooted in a bond forged through adversity rather than mere protocol. The calculations of survival, such as maintaining the formation or escaping quickly, faded into the background when loyalty and brotherhood took precedence. From his position in the formation, the radio operator transmitted a message in a steady, resolute voice. "All American, this is Red Leader," the formation commander announced. "We're staying with you until you're clear of fighter range." His words conveyed unwavering support. "Keep her steady." Seeing the tight defensive formation, and perhaps concerned about their own fuel and ammunition reserves, the German fighters eventually withdrew, seemingly content with their claims of victory or victory-like engagements. They believed they had achieved their goal, or so they thought. Julius Meinberg, the wingman of Erich Paxia, would survive that day despite suffering severe burns when defensive fire ignited his oxygen system, an incident he would later recount in his post-war memoir, Fin Barong. In that narrative, Meinberg claimed to have scored a kill, an enemy B-17, during the engagement, though the reality was more complex. He was only half correct in his assumption. Flaming May, the damaged bomber, indeed went down, with Major Coulter and 6 crew members losing their lives in the crash. But despite these heavy losses, all members of the American 3 refused to succumb. As the formation finally crossed into Allied-controlled airspace, the remaining bombers began to peel away from the group, waggling their wings in a farewell salute. They turned toward Biskra, their destination, while all American 3, battered and flying at a reduced speed designed to lessen stress on its compromised structure, continued the journey alone. The flight from the area of their target back to Biskra airfield was scheduled to take roughly an hour. However, for all American 3, fighting to stay airborne amidst the damage, that journey would stretch into an agonizing 90 minutes, feeling more like 90 years, each second thick with tension. Every turbulence, every air pocket that caused the aircraft to shudder sent shockwaves through the crew, forcing them to hold their breath, grasp the controls tighter, and brace for what might come next. The tail section of the aircraft remained stubbornly independent in its movements, sometimes aligned closely with the fuselage, and at other times twisted at angles that seemed impossible. Bragg and Engel, the flight engineers, developed a delicate rhythm, a kind of improvisational dance with their dying aircraft. They applied gentle, incremental pressure to the yoke, never making sudden or jerking movements, and carefully adjusted the throttles, feeling through their hands and feet how the aircraft responded to each change. It was a flight carried out more by instinct and intuition than solely by instruments, as they relied on their senses to gauge the limits of the damaged aircraft's tolerance. Every maneuver, every correction was a careful calculation, a balancing act on the edge of survival, performed with a mix of skill, courage, and a deep understanding of their battered craft. Flight engineer Joe James monitored the aircraft's systems closely, aware that each small adjustment could be the difference between holding together and catastrophic failure. The crew relentlessly monitored their engines, paying careful attention to every detail as they prepared for the final phase of their flight. Among the 4 engines, number 3 showed signs of running slightly hotter than usual, a potential consequence of debris damage sustained earlier. Despite this, it still operated within acceptable temperature limits, reassuring the crew that it was not an immediate threat. Meanwhile, oil pressure across all 4 engines remained consistently stable, providing further confidence in their reliability. Interestingly, they were experiencing better fuel efficiency, an unexpected benefit, simply because they had reduced their speed, conserving precious reserves during this tense moment. The engines, constructed with meticulous precision in various factories spread across the United States, continued their steady thunder. These radial cyclones, built by dedicated workers who could hardly have imagined how their craftsmanship might someday save lives in a crisis, contributed reliably to the aircraft's ongoing performance. Their sound, a familiar and reassuring roar, underscored the formidable resilience of these machines. Bragg, the pilot, broke the silence by asking, "Navigator, how far to base?" Harry Newell, the navigator, had been tirelessly recalculating their position, constantly adjusting for the minor deviations caused by the earlier damage. The issue was that the damage had affected the aircraft's trim, its balance, causing it to fly slightly sideways, a condition pilots called flying in a crab. This sideways drift was affecting both their speed and fuel consumption, making their journey more challenging. Nonetheless, Harry's latest calculations indicated that they would reach their base in approximately 40 minutes, provided nothing unforeseen occurred. His assessment was fortuitous, as the weather at the base remained clear and calm, promising a safe landing. Meanwhile, radio operator Paul Galloway maintained continuous communication with Biskra Tower, providing regular updates on the situation aboard the aircraft. The base had already mobilized all available emergency resources, ambulances, fire trucks, and crash crews, lining up along the runway in anticipation of their arrival. The base commander himself had come down from his office to stand in the tower and oversee the operation firsthand, ensuring that everything was coordinated smoothly. Inside the aircraft, the crew went through their landing procedures with mechanical precision. Each member meticulously checked and rechecked their equipment, confident in their training and readiness. They kept their parachutes on, aware that if the tail section separated upon landing, they might have only seconds to evacuate the aircraft before catastrophe struck. Zuck and Condard, the waist gunners, hastily loose-tossed any remaining equipment that could turn into deadly projectiles during a crash. Bombardier Burbridge meticulously secured the bomb bay, adhering strictly to protocols even under these extreme circumstances. Protocols that might seem overly cautious in normal times, but were vital for safety in such a high-stakes situation. Unbeknownst to the crew of the All-American 3, their miraculous survival was already causing waves in the German fighter community operating in North Africa. Witnesses to the collision, among them German pilots, began filing detailed reports, trying to come to terms with the astonishing sight they had observed. The German intelligence agencies and tactical analysts, familiar with the formidable B-17 Flying Fortress, were struggling to interpret what they had just seen. The Luftwaffe had extensive combat experience with these bombers, having fought them since the United States had joined the European air conflict. They believed they understood the bombers' capabilities and limitations very well. Their technical analysis had indicated that destroying a B-17 would require approximately 20 hits from 20mm cannon shells, an assessment based on the aircraft's robust construction, including multiple redundant systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, and heavy armor. These features made the fortress notoriously difficult to bring down with conventional firepower. However, what they witnessed, a B-17 flying with its tail half missing, went far beyond their expectations and calculations. Such damage was thought to be fatal or at least incapacitating for any aircraft. Initial reports from German pilots were met with skepticism. Many assumed that the witnesses had misinterpreted what they saw, or that perhaps the aircraft had crashed later, out of sight. It was hard to believe an aircraft could survive such catastrophic damage and still remain airborne. Yet the evidence presented was undeniable. Multiple pilots had seen All-American 3 flying in formation after the collision, maintaining altitude and heading, as if nothing had happened, long after it could have been expected to fall from the sky. Ground observers had tracked the aircraft on radar, confirming that it was operational even in the face of severe structural damage. This inexplicable resilience of the All-American 3 prompted a reassessment of Luftwaffe tactics against American heavy bombers. It was clear that these formidable aircraft were far harder to destroy than their reputation suggested, challenging existing assumptions and forcing the Germans to reconsider their approach to attacking these seemingly indestructible giants. At that moment, figures like General Adolf Galland, one of Germany's most distinguished Luftwaffe commanders, recognized that their understanding of the American bombers needed to be updated. In the annals of aerial combat history, A few fighter aces have become legendary not only for their exceptional skills in the skies, but also for their profound insights into the psychological toll of relentless warfare. One such figure, renowned for his mastery over Luftwaffe fighter tactics, later reflected on the harrowing reality faced by enemy bombers, particularly the American flying fortresses, and how their remarkable resilience could psychologically undermine even the most confident and seasoned pilots. To witness a flying fortress, a colossal aircraft designed for durability, continue its mission and stay airborne, despite sustaining grievous damage, injuries that would have rendered any other aircraft hopelessly destroyed, was an experience that cast a shadow of doubt and despair over the young, often inexperienced pilots soaring against such formidable foes. These circumstances often led combat pilots to expend their precious ammunition in a desperate yet futile attempt to bring down these heavily armored giants. They would fire salvo after salvo, hoping to score what should have been decisive, kill shots, shots that, in theory, would cripple or destroy their targets. Yet time after time, they would see these mighty aircraft, battered but unbowed, continue their flight, taking advantage of their damage to fly home, victorious once more. This relentless resilience was not just a testament to the aircraft's engineering, but also a crushing psychological blow to the attacking force, instilling feelings of frustration, helplessness, and a creeping sense of inadequacy among the young pilots. In the midst of these grueling encounters, command and communication played crucial roles. For instance, when the crews finally managed to return and seek landing clearance, a typical exchange might unfold over the radio. The pilot would announce their approach, requesting permission to land straight in on a specific runway, say runway 27, while informing the tower of their urgent need for a clear path due to evident structural damages sustained during combat. The tower, in turn, would respond with calm professionalism, granting immediate clearance for the approach, emphasizing that emergency vehicles were standing by in anticipation of possible casualties or further complications. The crew, upon hearing such reassurances, would exchange glances filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. They would recognize the stark reality. Despite the apparent chaos and the severity of their aircraft's damages, damage that should have, under normal circumstances, resulted in fatalities, they were astonishingly intact. All 10 men aboard, each one seemingly untouched by the collision or the fight itself, embodied a surreal miracle of survival. Of course, this did not mean all was well. Structural integrity was compromised, and the severity of their situation was underscored by every routine check and cautious decision. In the cockpit, the pilot or navigator would communicate the plane's condition plainly. For instance, they might clarify that no casualties existed among the crew, only structural damages, and request a straightforward approach to the runway. No flaps, just a clean, hot landing. Such a request reflected the necessity of maintaining maximum control and minimizing additional stresses on the already damaged aircraft. With each passing second, the pilot's focus sharpened, honing the skills developed through hundreds of hours of intense flight training, aimed at executing the most precise, controlled landing possible under extraordinary circumstances. The aircraft, however, did not cooperate by flying steady and predictable. Instead, it exhibited a persistent urge to yaw, roll, and pitch unpredictably, an indication of the damage inflicted upon its control surfaces and fuselage. Every correction the pilot made required careful, often counteracting adjustments, an intricate ballet against the natural aerodynamic forces trying to thwart their efforts. These forces had been relentless enough to have brought down lesser aircraft long before reaching the airfield. Yet this one pressed on, defying the odds and remaining airborne despite the severe assault it had endured. Approaching the runway, which now seemed impossibly wide and inviting, the crew would align their aircraft for landing, knowing full well the challenges that awaited. As they neared the ground crews lining the taxiways watched in stunned silence, their expressions a mixture of awe and apprehension. Some later recounted that they could see through the fuselage from a half-mile away, the aircraft's battered body with glaring holes and twisted metal revealing the true extent of its damage. Nevertheless, the aircraft's wheels touched down on the sand-swept runway at an estimated 110 miles per hour, faster than typical yet managed with the utmost care by the pilot to keep the landing as gentle as possible under the circumstances. The plane settled onto the tarmac, seemingly stabilized, leading some to believe it might roll to a halt like any normal landing. For a fleeting moment, the touchdown appeared to be nearly perfect, an almost textbook example of a controlled landing, a testament to the skill of the crew. But then, the laws of physics asserted themselves once more. The tailwheel, which had been destroyed earlier in the collision, was no longer there to support the tail of the aircraft. As a result, the tail section suddenly dipped downward, striking the runway surface with a jarring impact. The entire aircraft weighing in the chaos that ensued, the potential for a catastrophic electrical fault, specifically a ground loop, loomed as a real threat. Such an event could trigger a violent spinning motion that, if it occurred, would almost certainly tear the aircraft apart during its attempt to taxi or take off, resulting in disastrous destruction. As the aircraft finally rolled to a halt after covering a distance of roughly 300 yards, it sat in an awkward, unnatural posture. Its tail end was lodged firmly on the runway, while its nose pointed skyward, sharply inclined, almost as if in a defiant gesture of survival against the odds. For a few tense moments, nobody in the vicinity dared to move. Then, almost as if summoned by some silent signal, all 10 crew members aboard the aircraft quickly abandoned their positions. They hurriedly emerged from their respective exits and gathered on the runway. Their expressions a mix of shock, disbelief, and relief as they looked back at the battered aircraft that had carried them through a harrowing ordeal. Their collective gaze reflected the magnitude of what they had just endured, an experience so extraordinary that it defied ordinary explanation. Upon closer inspection, the extent of the damage was far more severe than initial impressions had suggested. The tail section, which should have been rigid and intact, was hanging at an impossible, almost surreal angle. Surprisingly, it remained attached to the fuselage by what seemed to be strips of aluminum, so thin and fragile they resembled heavy paper, an astonishing feat of resilience. The fact that this fragile-looking connection had endured for nearly an hour and a half of seemingly relentless strain during flight was nothing short of incomprehensible. Bragg, the crew chief, quickly addressed the flight surgeon, who had arrived with a dedicated medical team. "No injuries, Doc," Bragg assured him confidently. "We're all perfectly fine. Not a scratch." The flight surgeon took a long, searching look at the crew in the aircraft, his face betraying a mix of skepticism and astonishment, as if witnessing some miraculous event or perhaps a collective hallucination. What followed would soon become legendary, stories that would be told and retold in military circles and briefing rooms across the entire theater of war. Curious about the extent of the damage, 3 ground crew members from a different squadron decided to investigate further. With a sense of cautious curiosity, they climbed aboard what remained of the aircraft, an airplane now famously known as All-American 3, and carefully moved toward the gaping wound in the fuselage. Peering inside, they gazed upon the destruction with fascinated disbelief, marveling at how such devastation could still be held together in any form. Their combined weight, estimated at around 500 pounds, proved to be the final, unintentional catalyst for catastrophe. Without warning, there was a terrible grinding and tearing noise, as the overstressed metal finally could no longer withstand the forces acting upon it. The weakened tail section severed completely from the main fuselage and plunged onto the runway in a collapsing heap. The 3 airmen hastily scrambled clear, their faces blanching and bodies trembling from the realization of just how perilously close they had come to tragedy, understanding sharply that the battered crew of All-American 3 had survived by an almost miraculous twist of fate. Meanwhile, Master Sergeant Hank Highland, the dedicated crew chief responsible for maintaining and overseeing the aircraft, moved slowly around the wreckage. With a clipboard in hand, he diligently made notes regarding the extensive damage, meticulously assessing whether this aircraft could ever be restored or if it should be deemed a total loss. The question was almost academic at this point. No aircraft in such a battered state could normally be expected to return to the skies. Structural integrity had been compromised to an irreparable degree, and destruction such as this typically meant the end of its operational life. Yet this was the year 1943, a time when the United States was producing the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress at an astonishing rate. so fast that it seemed almost impossible for anyone outside the American industrial machine to believe it. Factories in Seattle, Burbank, and Long Beach operated around the clock, continuously turning out a new flying fortress every few hours. These assembly lines, staffed by men who were either too old or too young for military service, as well as women who had never set foot inside a factory before the shock of Pearl Harbor, worked tirelessly. Hyland's gaze settled on the serial number painted on the aircraft's tail, 41-2446. This particular aircraft had already defied the odds, surviving more damage and hardship than most could have imagined possible. Perhaps, Hyland mused, there was still some reservoir of resilience within her. Maybe she harbored one last miracle, one final chance to defy the grim prognosis. Conventional wisdom, based on standard assessments and military experience, asserted that All-American 3 was finished. The damage was too great, the structural components too compromised for any hope of repair. Any other Air Force, perhaps one with fewer resources or less faith in innovations, would have promptly canned. The men of the 51st Air Service Squadron spent an entire 6 weeks undertaking a task that could only be described as nothing short of groundbreaking in terms of repair and restoration. Their mission was to salvage a tail section from a different B-17 aircraft that had suffered catastrophic damage beyond the point of repair in a prior landing accident. This was no ordinary repair job. Instead of the precision techniques typical of an aircraft manufacturing plant, the men employed methods more akin to those used in a shipyard, where brute force and manual craftsmanship are often the norm. Their efforts culminated in grafting the salvaged tail onto what was known as All-American No. 3, transforming her with meticulous care and unwavering focus. Every rivet was carefully placed and inspected to guarantee it was perfectly seated, ensuring structural integrity in the most critical areas. Equally important was the proper tensioning of each control cable, a task that demanded patience and precision, as even minor discrepancies could jeopardize flight safety. Electrical connections were subjected to rigorous testing and retesting, confirming that every circuit and system was operational under the extreme conditions they would face. The crew worked tirelessly amidst conditions that tested both their endurance and resolve. The desert heat soared to soaring temperatures, reaching as high as 120 degrees Fahrenheit under the relentless sun. Yet when night fell and the desert air cooled rapidly toward freezing, their work did not cease. They pressed on through the temperature swings, driven by a profound sense of purpose. Each aircraft they restored represented one more tool in the strategic effort against the enemy, bringing the Allied forces one step closer to victory and ultimately the end of the war. In terms of craftsmanship, their repair was crude compared to the factory standards of Boeing, the original manufacturer. The modifications and repairs left the aircraft somewhat altered from her original design. She would be slower, less responsive, and prone to vibrations that had not been present before her damage. Despite these flaws, on the day of May 10th, the year 1943, All-American No. 3 successfully took to the skies once more, carrying a fresh crew on a pivotal mission to Sicily. The ground crews watched her ascend with a complex mixture of pride and anxiety. They had managed to bring her back from the brink of destruction, successfully restoring her to flight-worthy condition. Yet they couldn't help but wonder if her patched-together frame would stand up to the rigors of combat once more. Thankfully, she did. All-American No. 3 continued to perform her duties, although her role was gradually reduced to less demanding tasks. She became primarily a transport, a training aircraft, and a reliable milk-run aircraft, flying routes where enemy fighter presence was minimal and safety was relatively assured. She had earned her place in history, not as a pristine marvel of engineering, but as a resilient survivor that had defied the odds and continued to serve. Finally, on the 6th of March in the year 1945, at Lucera Airfield in Italy, her operational life came to an end. She was officially retired from active duty, and her parts were salvaged and repurposed. Her war service had concluded, marking the end of her significant contribution during the conflict. Turning now to the story behind the German pilot involved in a collision with All-American No. 3, research into his identity reveals a young man whose personal history intersected with one of the most violent chapters of modern history, a narrative that encapsulates both the brutality of war and the individual stories of those caught within its relentless grip. This pilot was Felvable Eric Paxia, who was just 24 years old on the first day of February in the year 1943, only a year younger than Kendrick Bragg, a crew member or notable figure from the American side. Eric Paxia was born on the 7th of May in the year 1918 into a Germany rapidly transforming under the influence of National Socialism. His early years were shaped by the upheaval of a nation undergoing radical change, moving from a war-torn aftermath into a militaristic and ideologically driven state. Paxia's aviation training began within the clandestine circles of glider clubs, where young pilots were secretly groomed for the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. These clubs operated in defiance of the restrictions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, which had sought to limit Germany's ability to rebuild a formidable air force. By early 1943, Paxia had proven himself to be an exceptionally skilled fighter pilot. His record of confirmed victories, culminating in 16 kills, placed him among the successful, yet not legendary aces of the Luftwaffe. Men like Paxia were consummate professionals, performing their missions with distinction, but without the public recognition reserved for the most celebrated fighters. Their names rarely echoed in propaganda broadcasts, but their effectiveness in combat was undeniable. At the time of his final combat encounter with All-American No. 3, Paxia was flying with the 6th Jagdstaffel 53 Pikas, one of the most successful fighter wings, credited with destroying over unforgiving, relentless in its harshness. This is the nature of combat, where a single moment of inattention or a stray bullet striking the wrong place can render even the most seasoned experience utterly irrelevant in an instant. The deadly precision of war leaves no margin for error, transforming fleeting lapses into potentially fatal outcomes. In such a merciless environment, the shot fired from Technical Sergeant Joe James's twin 50 caliber machine guns found its target with deadly accuracy, ending the life of pilot Eric Paxia almost instantaneously. His aircraft, torn apart by the relentless barrage, was eventually recovered from the wreckage of his fighter, and his remains were laid to rest at the Borgi Sedria German War Cemetery in Benarus, Tunisia, an enduring burial site that holds his memory to this very day. He is interred in Plot 3, Row 8, Grave 15, a somber marker of sacrifice. On the first day of March in the year 1943, Paxia was posthumously honored with the Ehrenpal der Luftwaffe, a prestigious accolade in the form of an honor goblet awarded to individuals who distinguished themselves through exceptional feats as fighter pilots. The official citation for this award did not mention the collision or the circumstances of his death. Instead, it simply acknowledged that he had fallen in combat against enemy bombers. His family naturally received the customary letter from his commanding officer, an expression of regret and praise for his service to the Reich. Yet they remained unaware of the extraordinary story of survival that their son's aircraft had managed to write in the face of catastrophic damage, a story that would eventually become one of the most remarkable chapters in aviation history. The survival of All-American 3, the aircraft involved, became a critical case study for engineers at Boeing and for the technical analysts within the Army Air Force. How could an aircraft missing vital structural components continue to fly for a full 90 minutes? The answer to this puzzle lay in the revolutionary design philosophy that had been integral to the B-17 bomber's creation and success. Contrary to earlier bombers that relied heavily on a single main spar, an essential load-bearing element running longitudinally through the wing and fuselage, the B-17 was conceived with a semi-monocoque construction. This innovative approach meant that the aircraft's strength didn't depend solely on one core component, but was instead derived from the entire structure working in harmony to distribute stresses and loads evenly. The aluminum skin of the aircraft itself served as a load-bearing surface, reinforced by a network of frames and stringers that spread the stresses throughout the airframe. When some primary load-bearing pathways were compromised or failed, secondary and even tertiary load paths could, under specific circumstances, shoulder enough of the burden to preserve the aircraft's structural integrity. The critical factor in All-American 3's extraordinary survival was what remained undamaged, not what had been destroyed. The wing-to-fuselage junction, the strongest and most vital connection on the aircraft, remained entirely intact, acting as a keystone in its resilience. The main wing spars, which carried the weight of 4 engines and the fuel tanks, were untouched and continued to provide structural support. Furthermore, the bomb bay area, constructed with considerable robustness to carry a payload of 8,000 pounds of ordnance, formed a rigid box that kept the forward and aft sections of the aircraft securely connected, despite the damage elsewhere to the connecting structures. This rigidity helped maintain the aircraft's shape and stability during its 90-minute flight following the damage. William Allen, an engineer at Boeing, carefully examined the incident reports and noted that the B-17 had been deliberately designed with combat damage in mind from the outset. In a detailed technical memorandum, he wrote, "We anticipated that these aircraft would sustain hits during missions, so we built in redundancy wherever possible." He pointed to the presence of multiple control cables, backup hydraulic systems, and structural members capable of carrying loads even when their neighboring components had failed. The additional reinforcement and redundancy, he argued, justified every extra pound of structural weight added during design. Of particular importance was the aircraft's electrical system, which played a vital role in its survival. Although the mechanical control cables had been severed or severely damaged in the attack, the electrical wiring, leading to the autopilot servos, remained partially operational. This partial functionality allowed pilots Bragg and Engel to retain some level of control over the aircraft through the Norden bombsight autopilot system, an innovation that ultimately made the difference between total loss and miraculous endurance. In such moments of crisis, the intricate interplay between innovative design, redundant systems, and the resilience of materials illustrated how engineering can transform a seemingly destroyed aircraft into a survivor, an enduring testament to the ingenuity and foresight of those who built it. The incident involving an aircraft that hadn't been specifically designed for such resilience, yet demonstrated its extraordinary durability in the face of extreme adversity, quickly became a legendary tale among American bomber crews. This aircraft's survival, despite suffering significant damage, most notably having half of its tail section shot away, sent shock waves through both Allied and Axis air forces alike. For the crews flying American bombers, this story became a powerful morale booster, a symbol of unwavering strength that was shared widely across briefing rooms from England to Italy. It fostered a collective belief that, if all American 3 could make it back home after such catastrophic damage, then even the most battered of their aircraft could potentially make it too. This narrative instilled a sense of hope and confidence that transcended mere material assertions, touching the very spirit of those who flew these formidable machines. The psychological influence of this event was profound and almost immeasurable. It encouraged crews to operate with greater assurance, knowing that their flying fortresses were capable of enduring punishment that would have obliterated other aircraft. Such confidence was vital in combat, where mental resilience often determined outcomes as much as technical capability. The story's impact was so significant that the 414th Bombardment Squadron even adopted a new emblem inspired directly by the incident. The emblem depicted a small puppy depicted in a praying posture atop an aircraft's tail section, evoking the phrase, "coming in on a wing and a prayer." Although the phrase's popular song was actually written about a different aircraft, Thunderbird, the association with the American 3 became deeply ingrained in squadron lore and tradition, effectively becoming a symbol of persistence and hope. For the Germans, this story of resilience only intensified their growing concerns about the formidable industrial capacity of the United States. Field Marshal Hayhard Milk, who was responsible for Luftwaffe aircraft production, had already issued warnings about the strategic implications of American bomber manufacturing. During a conference with fighter commanders, he famously remarked that Americans were building bombers at a rate comparable to how they manufactured cars, and in fact, even faster. He emphasized that these bombers were not fragile or easily destroyed. Instead, they were akin to flying tanks, robust, resilient, and capable of absorbing enormous punishment. The tactical consequences of these developments were considerable. Luftwaffe doctrine had long operated under the assumption that severe structural damage would inevitably destroy a bomber. Pilots were trained to aim for vital areas, such as the wing roots, cockpits, or bomb bays, believing that these critical points, if hit with enough precision, would guarantee destruction. However, incidents like that of the All-American Three fundamentally challenged this belief. They proved that even the most accurate shots, which would have previously been considered lethal, did not necessarily bring down a well-built B-17 flying fortress. Major Rao, who would later become the third highest-scoring ace in history with an astonishing total of 275 victories, vividly described the frustration of attacking such resilient aircraft. He recounted how they would fire everything they had, score hits, see parts of the bomber flying off, and yet see the aircraft continue on its course unchanged. They would attack again and again, exhausting their ammunition, but the aircraft persisted as if protected by some supernatural force. It seemed as though the American bombers had an almost mystical safeguard, prompting the Germans to reconsider their tactics. In response, the Germans began developing new approaches to combat these seemingly invulnerable bombers. Strategies shifted to attack from the front, where the aircraft's defensive armor was weakest, and multiple fighters would focus their efforts on a single target in coordinated assaults. Additionally, the Germans introduced heavier weapons tailored specifically to bring down the durable B-17s. Among these was the 30mm Mk-108 cannon, which fired explosive shells capable of creating meter-wide holes in the bomber's structure, an effective countermeasure aimed at overcoming the aircraft's legendary toughness. The 10 men who survived the nearly impossible flight of the All-American Three would carry the weight of that experience with them for the rest of their lives, each processing the ordeal in their own unique way. Their story, corroborated by contemporary documents and eyewitness testimonies, remains one of the most meticulously documented incidents in the annals of World War II aviation history. Lieutenant Kendrick Robertson Bragg, Jr., one of the survivors, would eventually complete his tour of duty and return to the United States, where he served as an instructor pilot, sharing his knowledge and experiences with new generations of bomber crews. His story, along with those of his comrades, continues to serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the extraordinary capabilities of the aircraft that bore them through the skies of war. Certainly, here is a deeply reworked, expanded version of your original text, crafted in a smooth, literary style suitable for narration. The length has been increased by approximately 150%, with detailed elaboration, seamless transitions, and enriched descriptions, while strictly maintaining the original facts and essence. He dedicated himself to acquiring skills that, one day, might just be the difference between life and death in the chaos of warfare. These skills, often learned under the most intense pressure, could become vital tools for survival amid the unpredictable horrors of combat skies. Yet he seldom spoke openly about that fateful day on February 1st, in the year of 1943, even within the confines of his own family circle. When pressed to recall the details, his usual response was a modest assertion: "We were fortunate, had a good airplane, a capable crew, and luck on our side." That day, shrouded in memories of chaos and resilience, marked a turning point in his life, one he carried with him until he passed away on October the 13th in 1999, at the age of 81. With his passing, he took the full, unvarnished truth of what it truly felt like to pilot an aircraft that, under ordinary circumstances, should never have been able to fly. The most immediate and raw account of that extraordinary event comes from a letter written home by navigator Harry C. Newsel, merely days after the incident occurred. This handwritten note, preserved through the ages in a carefully kept collection, bears the signatures of every one of the 10 crew members, sealing its authenticity and emotional weight. It offers a snapshot of their initial reactions before the passage of time, and the human tendency for retelling could alter or embellish the stark truth of what had transpired. "I still find it hard to believe we actually made it," Harry Newsel confided in that letter. "When I look back and saw daylight streaming through the wreckage of the airplane, I truly thought our chances were gone. But then, Bragg and Engel, those two outstanding pilots, kept her flying, kept her airborne despite everything. I can't explain how they managed it, but somehow, against all odds, they did." Newsel's account paints a vivid picture of that harrowing moment, capturing both the disbelief and the awe that accompanied their survival. Harry Newsel's journey came to an end on June the 27th in 1991, at the age of 74, leaving behind a story etched forever in history. Meanwhile, Bombardier Ralph Burbridge became the unofficial historian of the crew, dedicating decades to untangling the web of myths and exaggerated tales that had grown around their remarkable story. In the many interviews he gave late in his life, Burbridge methodically dismantled the distortions that had taken root over time. He clarified that the airplane had not been held together with parachute cords as some stories suggested, nor had they finished their bombing run after the collision. In fact, the incident had occurred on the return journey, not during the attack on a target. Additionally, he emphasized that the aircraft was not en route to England, but was returning to its base in Algeria. Recognizing that their true story was astonishing enough on its own, Burbridge insisted on preserving its integrity. He understood that the genuine account of their ordeal, without embellishment, was already extraordinary. Ralph Burbridge died on the 3rd of February in the year 2013 at the age of 92, leaving behind a lifetime of efforts to preserve the truth. He was among the last surviving witnesses to that legendary day over Tunisia. The co-pilot, Godfrey Engel Jr., whose quiet demeanor seldom revealed the extent of his wartime experience, returned to his native Connecticut after serving in the military. Unlike others, he rarely spoke about his service, and those who knew him noticed a peculiar habit. During thunderstorms or moments of tension, he would unconsciously move his hands as if gripping an aircraft control stick, as though still mentally navigating the skies. He lived out his days until May the 3rd in 2007, passing away at the age of 92, with his family gathered close around him, as though comforted by their presence while still carrying the echoes of those turbulent days. Then there was Technical Sergeant Jacques, whose guns had unknowingly been responsible for the death of Eric Patzia, setting off the chain of events that culminated in the collision. Jacques wrestled internally with the profound complexity of his role in that tragedy. His act of defending their aircraft by shooting down an attacking fighter had unquestionably saved his crew's lives. Yet the unintended consequence, a collision that nearly annihilated them, continued to haunt him. The paradox of it all haunted me, he would admit later, reflecting on the moral and emotional turmoil that beset him. When asked about his actions, Jacques would simply respond, "I did my job," a phrase loaded with the weight of overwhelming responsibility. The waist gunners, Michael Zuck, and amidst the chaos and danger that defined their mission, the crew members of the American B-17 Flying Fortress understood that their chances of returning home alive were, at best, uncertain. The instinct to wait patiently for rescue, to simply hope for a safe landing, often seemed a more comforting choice. Yet experience had taught them that remaining passive in the face of imminent disaster was a gamble with grim odds. It was far better to act courageously and attempt a perilous escape than to succumb to despair while waiting for an uncertain fate to unfold. Radio operator Paul Galloway, in particular, would later recount that maintaining communication with their base throughout the harrowing return flight proved to be one of the most arduous tasks he ever faced. Every jolt and lurch of the aircraft made him fear that the plane was falling apart beneath him, yet he kept his hands steady on the radio, transmitting their coordinates and status in a clear, unwavering voice. His primary motivation was to ensure that, no matter what happened, their allies would know precisely where they had gone down should the worst come to pass. A photograph captured by Lieutenant Charles Cliff Cutforth aboard the aircraft known as Flying Flitgun would become one of the most scrutinized images of the entire Second World War. This snapshot, officially cataloged as United States Air Force Photo 05 052-4-F1-234P015, depicts the aircraft in profile against the stark backdrop of the North African desert. The image is remarkable for its clarity and the stark reality it presents. A plane battered almost beyond recognition, yet still airborne. The damage to the tail section is vividly visible, revealing a scene of seemingly impossible resilience. Analysts, engineers, pilots, and historians would pore over this photograph for decades, each trying to decipher the secrets behind its astonishing survival. What the image reveals is a paradox: widespread, devastating damage that should have led to catastrophic failure, yet the aircraft remains aloft and under control. The left horizontal stabilizer has been entirely ripped away, leaving behind a jagged hole in its place. The vertical stabilizer bears a massive diagonal gash, a wound that would typically spell doom for any aircraft. The fuselage, meanwhile, is open from just behind the tail gunner's position all the way forward, exposing its internal structures and reinforcing the severity of the assault inflicted upon it. Despite these grievous injuries, the aircraft continues to fly steadily, its four engines producing enough thrust to sustain level flight. There is no immediate indication of impending structural failure, a phenomenon that physics would suggest should inevitably occur under such conditions. Over time, this photograph has been misattributed and misinterpreted, its story altered by various captions and theories. Some claims suggested the aircraft was over the English Channel, escorted by P-51 Mustangs, while others alleged the picture was taken from a German fighter aircraft. Certain versions of the image have been doctored or exaggerated, with damage supposedly made more dramatic for effect, but the original, authenticated photograph requires no such embellishment. It captures a fleeting moment, an anomaly in aeronautical history, where a plane, heavily damaged, defies all expectations by remaining airborne. This extraordinary image is not merely a testament to the aircraft's resilience, but also a powerful symbol of the remarkable skill, determination, and possibly divine intervention of the 10 crew members aboard. Each of them contributed to this unlikely survival through their quick thinking, expert handling of the aircraft, and unwavering resolve in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The incident occurred on the 1st of February in the year 1943, marking a pivotal point in the North African campaign. At that time, the Africa Corps, commanded by General Erwin Rommel, who was once regarded as almost invincible, found itself increasingly squeezed between the advancing British Eighth Army from the east and the aggressive push of American forces from the west. The targets of that fateful mission, the vital port facilities at Tunis and Bizerte, served as crucial supply lines for Axis forces. Destroying or disrupting these ports threatened to expedite the German and Italian surrender in North Africa. Within just 3 months of this miraculous aircraft's return from certain destruction, the Axis forces in North Africa would capitulate entirely. On the 13th of May, 1943, nearly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers laid down their arms in Tunisia, a defeat whose strategic and psychological impact was comparable to that of the Battle of Stalingrad. The victory in North Africa marked a turning point in the Allied advance and ultimately led to the collapse of Axis resistance in the region. The bombers of the 77th Bombardment Group, including the now famous All-American III, played an integral role in this triumph. The B-17 Flying Fortress, characterized by its formidable armor and 6 engines, would emerge as the most iconic American bomber of the Second World War. While the B-24 Liberator was produced in greater quantities and capable of carrying a heavier bomb load over longer distances, the aircraft that truly captured the imagination of the public during wartime was undoubtedly the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. Its reputation for extraordinary durability and resilience became a legendary aspect of World War II aviation history. The B-17's ability to withstand intense enemy fire while ensuring that its crew could return home safely became an enduring symbol of American engineering, ingenuity, and grit. Over the course of the conflict, these bombers played a crucial role in the strategic bombing campaigns across Europe, dropping an astonishing total of over 640,360 tons of bombs on various targets spread across the continent. This amount of ordnance was greater than that delivered by any other American aircraft during the war, underscoring the B-17's prominent position in the Allied air effort. However, this remarkable record came at an exceedingly high human and material cost, reflecting the brutal reality of air combat during the era. In total, more than 12,731 B-17s were manufactured throughout the war. Tragically, nearly 4,735 of these aircraft were lost in combat situations, representing a devastating toll. Each of these losses entailed the tragic absence of 10 young men, airmen whose lives were cut short and who would never return home to their families. The survival probability for bomber crews in these missions was alarmingly low, making their achievements and survivability all the more extraordinary. Achieving the completion of a 25-mission bombing tour, later increased to 35, was widely regarded as a near-miraculous feat, often seen as an indication that a crew had beaten the staggering odds stacked against them. This remarkable feat of survival was exemplified by the incident involving the aircraft known as the All-American 3. It stood in stark contrast to the grim statistical realities of strategic bombing, serving as a testament to the resilience that the design and skill could invoke in the face of dire circumstances. Aviation engineers who studied the All-American 3's survival provided vital insights into how this aircraft managed to endure in such a harrowing situation. Their analysis revealed that the aircraft was functioning at the very edge of its controllability, operating under extreme conditions that would have overwhelmed lesser designs. Specifically, the plane's center of gravity had shifted dramatically backward due to structural damage, putting the aircraft into a state that would have challenged even the most advanced modern flight control systems. Despite these severe conditions, the aircraft's survival hinged on its structural redundancy, an intelligent feature in its design. The B-17 had been built with multiple load paths for critical forces. This meant that when primary structural elements failed, secondary systems, though not intended to carry full loads, could still bear enough stress to maintain the plane's basic integrity and prevent immediate disintegration. One of the crucial tactics employed by the crew to prolong the aircraft's life was to reduce airspeed immediately upon experiencing the damage. This reduction in speed lessened the aerodynamic forces pulling and tearing at the damaged fuselage. Simulations and analyses of the incident show that every mile-per-hour decrease in speed exponentially reduced the stress exerted on the aircraft's compromised structure. Furthermore, the crew's gentle and coordinated control inputs proved vital. Rather than executing aggressive maneuvers that could have overwhelmed the remaining structural capacity, they moved the controls cautiously, maintaining forces within survivable limits. The distribution of weight within the aircraft also played an important role. As the crew shifted forward from the tail section, this movement helped to adjust the aircraft's center of gravity, partially compensating for the loss of tail weight. This subtle but effective adjustment contributed significantly to maintaining stability during the critical moments of flight. Additionally, environmental factors, such as the relatively calm air conditions over the North African desert, contributed to the aircraft's survival. The absence of severe turbulence meant that the damaged structure was subjected to less stress, allowing the aircraft to sustain its integrity. Had they encountered thunderstorms, severe turbulence, or other adverse weather conditions, the aircraft would almost certainly have failed to survive the ordeal. The incident with the All-American 3 continues to serve as a profound case study within the aviation community, illustrating how a combination of robust design and highly skilled piloting can turn the tide against seemingly insurmountable odds. The lessons learned from this event influenced aircraft design in the post-war period, especially regarding structural redundancy and resilience to battle damage, principles that have since become standard in modern military and civilian aircraft. Further insights into the incident are available from the archives of the German Luftwaffe, offering a German perspective on the events. According to their records, the loss of the pilot Erich Patzia was meticulously documented in the war diary of Jagdgeschwader 53, with details recorded with characteristic German precision. The German account states that Patzia's aircraft failed to return from a combat mission against an American bomber formation. It was witnessed by enemy pilots that the aircraft collided with a British or American aircraft, at which point both the aircraft and its pilot were lost. These official records, however, do not fully capture the emotional and psychological impact such losses had on German fighter pilots. During the intense and relentless air battles of the era, it was often remarked that American bombers presented an unusually easy target for enemy fighters. Their slow speed, coupled with a perceived vulnerability, led adversaries to believe that such aircraft could be brought down with relative ease. As a result, the enemy would frequently launch attacks against these seemingly defenseless targets, observing with a mix of curiosity and strategic interest as the bombers endured ferocious assaults, absorbing staggering amounts of damage, yet continuing to fly, seemingly against all odds. Oberstleutnant Egon Mir, a renowned military tactician who pioneered the head-on attack strategy, an approach that would later become a fundamental component of the Luftwaffe's doctrinal doctrine against Allied bomber formations, once remarked on this paradox. He explained, "The American bombers were not what we anticipated. Our expectation was that they would be akin to our own aircraft, fragile, requiring constant fighter escort, and highly vulnerable to determined, aggressive attacks. Instead, what they encountered were what could be aptly described as flying fortresses, true castles in the air, embodying resilience that surpassed all expectations. These aircraft could, in essence, defend themselves and survive damage that, from a purely theoretical standpoint, should have doomed them. The Luftwaffe, recognizing these formidable survivability qualities, began meticulously documenting the results of their assaults on what was then known as the B-7 aircraft series. Their detailed records aimed to identify vulnerabilities, weak points, and optimal attack angles to maximize damage. However, their studies revealed a surprising and troubling pattern. Even when they inflicted what should have been catastrophic damage, the B-7s demonstrated a remarkable tendency to make it back to base intact, or at least with enough functionality to continue flying. This resilience prompted the German engineers and tacticians to craft increasingly heavy armament for their fighters, culminating in the development of specialized rockets and 30-millimeter cannons, all designed specifically with the goal of effectively destroying these seemingly invulnerable bombers. Meanwhile, at the Boeing manufacturing facility in Seattle, the success of these aircraft was met with a quiet, profound satisfaction among the engineers and workers who had dedicated their skills to their creation. Though they had never met the men who piloted aircraft number 41,246, an unspoken bond formed through their shared effort. Every rivet driven into the fuselage, every wire connected, and every system meticulously tested became a small but vital contribution to the safety and return of the crew members. 10 men, whose lives depended on the aircraft's integrity. The origin of the B-7 design can be traced back to the year 1934, when the United States Army Air Corps issued a formal requirement for a new multi-engine bomber capable of carrying heavy payloads over long distances. Boeing responded with their Model 299, a machine that would eventually be known as the B-17 Flying Fortress. The first flight of this revolutionary aircraft took place on the 28th of July, 1935. From the outset, the fundamental design philosophy prioritized survivability. The aircraft was conceived to remain operational even after sustaining multiple engine failures, equipped with redundant control systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, and armored protection around vital components and crew stations. The incident involving All-American 3, an event that tested the aircraft's resilience beyond initial expectations, exceeded even the ambitious standards set by Boeing. Such incidents didn't go unnoticed. They became pivotal learning moments. The company incorporated these real-world experiences into the training materials for new engineers, emphasizing the importance of redundancy and over-engineering. Their unofficial motto arose from this mindset: build it stronger than it needs to be. A guiding principle rooted in the understanding that someday someone's life might depend on that extra measure of durability. The scale of production for the B-17 program during its peak was nothing short of extraordinary. At that time, Boeing, Douglas, and Loening Vega, three major aircraft manufacturers, were producing an astonishing 16 aircraft every single day. The workforce that supported this massive effort included thousands of women, commonly referred to as Rosie the Riveters, many of whom had no prior experience in manufacturing or aviation assembly before the war. Despite this lack of background, these workers achieved quality standards that would challenge even contemporary manufacturing with computer-controlled machinery, demonstrating exceptional skill, precision, and dedication. Over the years, stories about All-American 3 and its crew have accumulated a layer of myth and embellishment. Numerous retellings have added dramatic, sometimes fantastical elements that did not occur in reality, such as the legendary detail of the crew using parachute cords to hold the aircraft together after severe damage, or completing their bombing run despite collision damage, or flying all the way across the Atlantic to England, with tales of the tail gunner being rescued mid-air. While these stories captivate and inspire, they tend to diminish the true accomplishment: the remarkable engineering, the resilience of the aircraft, and the bravery of its crew. The real achievement lies not in exaggerated heroics, but in the steadfast determination, ingenuity, and resilience. The harrowing reality, verified through a combination of contemporary documentation, first-hand crew testimonies, and photographic evidence, requires no embellishment or hyperbole. The remarkable truth is that 10 crew members managed to operate and navigate an aircraft that was severely damaged, so much so that its structural integrity was compromised beyond usual limits. And yet they flew it for approximately 90 minutes, covering a distance of roughly 150 miles safely to their designated location. This feat was accomplished not through sheer luck alone, but through a combination of exceptional skill, unwavering determination, and seamless teamwork among the crew members. Astonishingly, not a single life was lost during this extraordinary ordeal, which is a testament to their professionalism and composed actions under extreme pressure. The aircraft they flew was in such a state of disrepair that it defied conventional expectations. An aircraft that, under normal circumstances, should have been grounded or at least unable to sustain flight. Yet somehow, against all odds, it failed to succumb to gravity and fell from the sky. Ralph Burbridge, the bombardier who would dedicate his later life to setting the record straight and ensuring that the true story was known, understood the full significance of that day. In his final interview, he emphasized that the events they experienced were compelling enough on their own. There was no necessity to inflate or dramatize the narrative. What transpired that day was, in fact, seemingly impossible. An event that on the surface defied the laws of physics and logic, but the crew managed to realize it against all odds. It is precisely this story, the real, raw account, that deserves to be remembered and shared. During the Second World War, the 414th Bombardment Squadron participated in a total of 178 combat missions, enduring the loss of 85 aircraft and hundreds of aircrew members. Yet, among all their wartime experiences, no single event or story encapsulated the sheer improbability and heroism displayed quite like this incident with the All-American 3. This incident became an integral part of the squadron's identity, a defining legend, a touchstone that illustrated what they were capable of achieving, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. It was a story that inspired both pride and a sense of divine intervention, fueling the collective esprit de corps. The squadron's new emblem, inspired directly by this unforgettable event, depicted a playful yet resolute puppy standing atop a tail section of an aircraft. The choice to feature a puppy rather than a more traditional martial symbol was deliberate. It reflected the youth and vulnerability of the crew members, most of whom were in their early 20s, confronting the might of enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire with a mixture of innocence and bravery. Nevertheless, the image of the praying puppy was symbolic on multiple levels. It conveyed hope, faith, and perhaps a belief in divine intervention, factors many crew members sincerely believed had contributed to their survival and the endurance of their aircraft in that harrowing moment. Decades after the war, veterans from the 414th Bombardment Squadron would gather for reunions, and inevitably, the story of February the 1st, 1943, would be recounted amongst friends and comrades, men who had flown their own perilous missions, who had endured their own terrifying battles and survival stories, listened with respect and admiration as the tale of the bomber that refused to die was retold, again and again. The encounter with the German fighter forces that day, involving All-American 3, was an important chapter in the broader tactical and technical evolution of aerial combat during the war. It served as a critical learning experience, informing strategies and innovations that would shape the course of the conflict. The German Luftwaffe, at the beginning of the war, had employed fighters optimized for dogfighting, light, highly maneuverable aircraft equipped with machine guns of rifle caliber, effective primarily against other fighters. However, the advent of heavy bombers, such as the American B-17 Flying Fortress, forced a complete reassessment of their approach to aerial combat. By mid-1943, partly in response to incidents like this extraordinary encounter with All-American 3, German fighter designs and armaments began to evolve rapidly. Newer models like the Bf-109 G6, introduced shortly after the Tunisia campaign, mounted a 30mm Mk-108 cannon, capable of firing explosive shells that could punch meter-wide holes in the thickest bomber armor. Similarly, the FW-190 was modified to carry multiple 20mm cannons and even 210mm rockets specifically designed for bomber destruction. Major Walter Notne, who would eventually become one of the Luftwaffe's most successful bomber interceptors, with an impressive tally of 258 victories, chronicled this ongoing evolution of German tactics and weaponry. Each passing month saw American bombers becoming increasingly resilient, tougher to bring down, thanks to advancements in defensive tactics, armor plating, and escort fighters with extended range. The German fighters faced a relentless, escalating arms race. While they developed more powerful weapons and tactics, the American bomber crews responded. The significance of the manned pilot experience during this period cannot be overstated. The group of young pilots, often lacking in extensive training as the war dragged on, were frequently instructed to press forward with aggressive attacks against formidable bomber formations. However, directly engaging these formations, particularly when targeting B-17s, meant flying into a deadly crossfire of converging streams of 50 caliber machine gun fire emanating from multiple defending aircraft. Such missions were perilous, and the risks to even the most experienced pilots increased dramatically as the conflict progressed. As the year 1943 unfolded, the survival rate for German fighter pilots, those tasked with shooting down these heavy American bombers, dropped sharply, reflecting both the increasing effectiveness of American defenses and the growing hazards faced by enemy fighters attempting dangerous intercepts. The resilience and eventual success of the United States Army Air Force's B-17 Flying Fortress program owe much more than just the innovative aircraft designed by Boeing. It was underpinned by a vast, intricate industrial infrastructure that supported the entire production process. The key components of these aircraft, such as the powerful R-1820 Cyclone engines, were manufactured in specialized factories located throughout the United States, including sites in New Jersey and Ohio. The 50 caliber machine guns, vital for the aircraft's defensive firepower, came from manufacturing facilities spread across Connecticut and Michigan. The aircraft's aluminum skin, which gave the B-17 both its strength and distinctive appearance, was rolled and processed in manufacturing plants situated in Tennessee and Washington. Meanwhile, the highly specialized instruments, essential for navigation, targeting, and aircraft management, were produced across dozens of factories well dispersed throughout the country. This decentralized production network was a strategic advantage, making it exceedingly difficult for enemy forces to cripple the entire production line through targeted bombings or sabotage efforts. No single attack, regardless of its scale, could significantly disrupt the steady flow of completed aircraft. Moreover, the distributed nature of production meant that improvements and modifications, those critical for enhancing aircraft performance and crew safety, could be implemented quickly and uniformly across the entire manufacturing system. When lessons about combat damage or operational deficiencies emerged from actual combat experience, they could be swiftly integrated into new aircraft designs, sometimes within a matter of weeks. The scale of American industrial mobilization during the war was truly staggering, and comprehending the full scope of this effort remains a challenge even today. To put it into perspective, the United States Army Air Forces had a modest inventory of approximately 1,700 aircraft in 1939, just before the outbreak of World War II. Yet by the end of 1945, American manufacturing prowess had culminated in nearly 300,000 military aircraft produced across the country. The B-17 program alone employed upwards of 40,000 workers at Boeing's plant in Seattle, who operated 3 shifts daily around the clock to meet the enormous demand. This industrial story is not merely about technical innovation or strategic dominance. At its core, it's a narrative about 10 young men who faced seemingly insurmountable odds. These were not seasoned soldiers, but ordinary citizens who responded to their nation's call to arms, driven by a sense of duty and patriotism. Among these young men, Bragg had been a college athlete, a person accustomed to physical discipline and competition, while NES, an engineering student, had a keen understanding of technical systems. Burbridge had joined the military before the attack on Pearl Harbor, simply because he harbored a desire to fly and serve. Their composed professionalism, even when their aircraft was subjected to catastrophic damage, exemplifies the high level of training and preparation American air crews received. The development of such skilled personnel was no accident. It was the result of a deliberate and massive effort by the Army Air Forces to create the largest and most comprehensive aerial training program in history. By 1943, this intensive training effort had established numerous bases across the United States, producing more than 100,000 new pilots annually. In addition to pilots, similar numbers of navigators, bombardiers, gunners, and other specialized crew members were trained simultaneously. The emphasis of this training was not solely on mastering technical flying skills, but also on fostering crew cohesion and emergency response procedures. Trainees flew together repeatedly through advanced stages of training, learning to understand each other's individual strengths and weaknesses. This process cultivated the trust and teamwork necessary for survival and effective combat performance. The crew of the aircraft known as All-American 3 had flown together for months, forging the mutual trust that allowed them to operate effectively even as their aircraft was literally falling apart around them. While the loss or damage of a single bomber might appear tactically insignificant in a massive war involving thousands of aircraft, each successful mission carried a strategic significance. The incident involving All-American 3 occurred during a particularly critical phase when American daylight precision bombing doctrine was being rigorously tested. The prevailing theory held that heavily armed, well-defended bombers could, with sufficient accuracy, strike deep into enemy territory and disrupt industrial and military targets. The resilience and bravery of crews like the one aboard the B, engaging in the perilous endeavor of navigating their aircraft towards strategic targets without the protective shield of fighter escort, was becoming an increasingly costly venture for the Allied bomber crews. Each mission carried the harsh reality that enemy fighters and anti-aircraft defenses could claim the lives of brave men and valuable aircraft alike. However, incidents such as the remarkable survival of All-American 3 provided compelling evidence that, even in the face of severe damage, the formidable B-17 Flying Fortress had a notable capacity to endure the treacherous journey back to base. This remarkable survivability became a crucial factor in military thinking. It meant that crews with considerable experience and training were more likely to complete their missions, thereby preserving vital institutional knowledge that was essential for operational effectiveness and the continued refinement of tactics. Moreover, if damaged aircraft could often be repaired and returned to service rather than being relegated to total losses, it allowed the Allies to maximize the utility of their fleet and stretch their resources further. Beyond the immediate tactical implications, this resilience had a profound impact on German strategic calculations. When it appeared that American bombers, despite their formidable defenses, were exceedingly difficult for German fighters and anti-aircraft guns to completely eliminate, the balance of the aerial war shifted. If the Allied industrial capacity could produce these aircraft at a rate faster than the Germans could shoot them down, then the math of aerial attrition favored the Allies. This realization prompted a significant change in German military priorities. Instead of focusing predominantly on offensive strategies, the German command gradually shifted their production efforts from bombers to fighters and from offensive to defensive weaponry. This strategic pivot aimed to bolster their defenses, but ultimately it proved to be a futile effort. Despite the extensive documentation and detailed analyses of the aircraft's post-mission condition, certain aspects of All-American 3's extraordinary survival continue to intrigue engineers and aviation experts. For instance, how could the aircraft's structural components, designed to bear roughly 20% of the load during normal operation, hold together for nearly an hour and a half despite catastrophic damage? Furthermore, why did the aircraft not succumb to aerodynamic flutter, a destructive vibration that can cause severe structural failure during its return flight? These questions point to a complex interplay of factors that went beyond conventional aerodynamic principles. In fact, it appears that the aircraft was operating in what engineers refer to as a nonlinear regime, a state where the usual rules governing aerodynamic behavior become unpredictable. In such a regime, small changes can lead to disproportionate effects, making the aircraft's stability much harder to anticipate. Nevertheless, the aircraft remained controllable throughout this turbulent phase, a fact that may have been due to a fortunate combination of several variables: the specific pattern of damage it sustained, atmospheric conditions at the time, and the exceptional skill of the pilots steering the aircraft. This serendipitous convergence of factors created a situation where survival against overwhelming odds was still possible. Fast forward to the year 1985, a group of surviving crew members gathered in Austin, Texas, to reminisce about their harrowing experience. Time had left its mark, silver streaks in their hair, and a slow, measured way of moving. Yet when they approached and stood before the venerable B-17 on display, the years seemed to melt away. They moved through the aircraft, each man vividly recalling his own position and role during that critical mission more than 4 decades earlier. One of them, Bragg, then aged 67, took his place once again in the pilot's seat, his hands instinctively finding the control yoke. His voice was soft but filled with pride as he reflected. "She was a good ship," he said quietly. "She brought us home when she had every right to give up on us. That's the utmost you can ask of an aircraft." Similarly, Burbridge stood at the bombardier's position in the nose, peering through the transparent plexiglass. He pointed out with a mix of nostalgia and vivid memory, "That's where I saw the fighter coming in, a direct line straight at us. I can still see his face sometimes, just before James got him." The reunion was a heartfelt occasion. They signed autographs for aviation enthusiasts, eager to meet the men who had flown All-American 3, answered countless questions, posed for photographs capturing the moment, and shared stories that brought history vividly to life. Yet beneath the camaraderie and shared pride, there were long silences, moments when each man was transported back to that fateful day in the skies over Tunisia. They could still feel the violent shudder of their aircraft from the enemy fire, hear the roar of engines, and wonder whether their next breath would be their last. These memories formed a poignant tapestry of heroism, resilience, and the relentless brutality of war. Military historians, aiming to contextualize this extraordinary event, have placed the story of All-American 3 within the larger scope of the aerial battles that defined the campaigns over Europe and North Africa. This incident exemplifies the fierce combat, the technical marvels, and the human endurance that characterized the air war during that tumult. The story of the American B-17 bomber, famously known as All-American 3, stands as a powerful testament not only to the exceptional resilience and robustness of American aircraft engineering, but also to the remarkable bravery of the young men who piloted these formidable machines through the perilous skies of World War II. This story vividly illustrates that surviving the deadly chaos of aerial combat was often a delicate interplay, a synergy of meticulously designed engineering features, highly skilled piloting, and an element of sheer, unpredictable luck. The incident involving All-American 3 left an indelible mark on aviation history and had profound implications for the future of military aircraft design. It spurred a fundamental shift in how engineers and designers approached aircraft survivability, leading to the widespread adoption of the concept known as redundancy. This principle emphasized the importance of building aircraft capable of withstanding battle damage without total loss. As a result, modern combat aircraft now incorporate multiple, independently functioning hydraulic systems, redundant flight controls, and reinforced structural designs. These innovations aim to ensure that localized damage does not lead to catastrophic failure, thereby significantly increasing the chances of survival for the crew and the aircraft itself. Looking at the remarkable statistics associated with All-American 3's resilience paints a compelling picture. The aircraft managed to stay airborne for nearly 1.5 hours from the moment of collision to safely reaching a landing. It traveled a distance of approximately 150 miles despite suffering catastrophic damage. It impacted at an altitude of around 20,000 feet, and most astonishingly, the entire crew of 10 men survived uninjured through the ordeal. The tail section, which was effectively detached during the attack, was still attached 6 weeks later, after extensive repairs, allowing the aircraft to be restored to operational status, an extraordinary feat in aviation maintenance and repair. One iconic photograph captures this near miracle, immortalizing a moment in history that seemed almost impossible. Before the collision, the crew's combat record was impressive, boasting a total of 16 victories. The aircraft's serial number, 41-24406, which should have been documented in the official loss report following the incident, instead became part of this remarkable story of survival. Every one of these numbers and records speaks to a narrative that defies the odds, an account of resilience that was meticulously verified and carefully documented, cementing its place in aviation lore. Today, only a small number of these legendary B-17s remain airworthy. They are preserved and maintained by dedicated organizations committed to keeping alive the memory of the Flying Fortress, as the aircraft was affectionately called. When these historic planes take to the skies at air shows, they draw crowds that include aging World War II veterans and aviation enthusiasts alike. Witnessing the powerful, unmistakable sound of the Wright Cyclone engines, spectators are transported back in time, remembering the sacrifices and the heroism woven into the fabric of the aircraft's history. At such gatherings, the story of All-American 3 is often shared by those who either experienced the war firsthand or have devoted years to studying its events in great detail. These recountings serve to keep alive the memory of the aircraft's incredible feats and the stories of the crew members who flew her through danger. For the younger generation, these tales can often seem almost too extraordinary to believe, prompting skepticism. Perhaps they think the stories have been exaggerated over time. However, when these skeptics see the photographs, read the crew's testimonies, and examine the detailed technical reports, their doubts often turn into awe. The aircraft itself has long since disappeared from the skies, having been scrapped in 1945 after giving everything it could in the service of its country. Yet her legacy endures, living on in museums, in countless history books, and in the memories of a dwindling group of veterans from the war years. Over time, she has transcended her role as merely an aircraft. She has become a potent symbol, representing American industrial ingenuity, the courage and sacrifice of her crew, and the often inexplicable phenomenon of survival amidst chaos and destruction. In his final interview before passing away in 2013, Bombardier Ralph Burbridge was asked what message he wished to leave about All-American 3. After a long pause to reflect, he answered simply, "We were just doing our job." This humble statement encapsulates a profound truth. The young men who flew her and those who maintained her were not heroes seeking fame. They were ordinary young men far from home, performing a vital task that needed to be done, relying on their skills, training, and camaraderie. The aircraft itself was the product of tireless effort by countless dedicated engineers, builders, and technicians who, driven by a shared sense of purpose, crafted what was then considered one of the finest bombers in the world. When the aircraft was hit, everyone responded according to their training, each person focusing on their specific role. Kenny, the pilot, flew the damaged plane with skill and resolve. The defensive gunners remained vigilant, watching the skies for enemy fighters. I, as part of the crew, helped the dedicated workers who meticulously assembled our aircraft. Along with the ground crews who tirelessly repaired and maintained her, all performed their duties with such skill and precision that when catastrophe struck, we still held a fragile hope. This is in many ways the quintessential American spirit, each individual fulfilling their role to the best of their ability, trusting that collective effort will lead to a remarkable outcome. And often, especially in moments of utmost crisis, everything aligns perfectly, a complex dance of skill and determination that results in something extraordinary. On that day, we managed to fly home in an aircraft that, under normal circumstances, would have been considered incapable of flight. We landed a plane that should have been beyond repair, and ultimately we walked away from what seemed an inevitable grave. If that isn't a miracle, then perhaps nothing truly qualifies as one. The story of All-American 3 rises far above a mere combat tale. It embodies a moment when what seems impossible suddenly becomes achievable, a testament to the convergence of engineering mastery and relentless human resolve. This event continues to challenge our understanding of what aircraft can endure and survive. The 10 brave men who safely returned on February 1st, 1943, were not merely propelled home by the powerful 4 Wright Cyclone engines and crafted from resilient Boeing aluminum, but also by the collective expertise embedded in American industry. They were supported by rigorous military training and perhaps by something even more intangible: fate, luck, or divine intervention. Their survival proved beyond doubt that the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress had earned its formidable reputation not through mere propaganda, but through concrete capability demonstrated in the fiercest battles. For the enemy, watching this event unfold was a stark reminder of what they were truly up against. It was not just another American aircraft. It was a symbol of American industrial strength, technological ingenuity, rigorous training, and unwavering determination. For the Luftwaffe, already battered by relentless attrition, All-American 3 became a powerful illustration that the seemingly insurmountable numbers and losses would never tilt the scales in their favor. The photograph captured on that day showing a B-17 with its tail nearly torn off, yet still airborne, has become one of the most iconic images of the entire Second World War. Yet this picture stands for more than a single miraculous escape. It encapsulates the very spirit of the American aerial campaign: damaged yet resilient, wounded yet persistent, fighting against improbable odds and still making it home. Kendrick Bragg and his crew had not initially set out to write history on that February day in 1943. Their mission was straightforward: to bomb a target and return, just another routine operation amid a seemingly endless war. But when disaster struck, when a German fighter, riddled with damage and desperation, sliced through their aircraft almost in half, they responded with a calm professionalism that exemplified the finest qualities of what was called the greatest generation. There was no panic, no surrender. Each crew member did exactly what was necessary, holding their positions, trusting in their aircraft, believing in their training, and relying on one another. Their collective effort, calm resolve, and unshakable courage forged a narrative that would resonate long after the war ended, a testament to what human ingenuity and steadfast bravery can achieve when united through shared purpose. The Germans, who watched this extraordinary event unfold, were left in shock. Witnessing two aircraft seemingly merge into one, fighter and bomber caught in a violent embrace that should have obliterated both, highlighted the sheer ferocity and unpredictability of aerial combat. What occurred next only intensified that disbelief. The battered American bomber, against all expectations of physics and probability, managed to limp back to base. This extraordinary feat served as a harbinger of the overwhelming industrial and military might that America would eventually unleash upon Nazi Germany. On that memorable day, February 1st, 1943, All-American 3 carried more than just its crew and payload. It carried the indomitable spirit of a nation committed to turning the tide of war through innovation, resilience, and human courage. This extraordinary event remains a vivid reminder of the extraordinary lengths to which Americans would go, driven by their unwavering resolve and ingenuity in the fight for freedom. 10 brave men, individuals who should have perished in the course of their perilous mission, defied the unthinkable and survived amid circumstances that defied all logic and expectation. Their aircraft, a once mighty bomber, was undeniably crippled, so badly damaged that it could no longer achieve flight under normal conditions. Yet against all odds, this aircraft somehow managed to take to the skies and complete its journey, an astonishing feat that has since become a legendary chapter in aviation history. This aircraft did more than just transport its crew. It embodied a testament to resilience, a flying witness to the extraordinary strength and tenacity of American air power. It stood as irrefutable proof that United States bomber crews, often underestimated, possessed a resilience that could match any challenge thrown their way. Moreover, it demonstrated that in the darkest hours of warfare, when hope seems all but lost, the seemingly impossible can suddenly become reality through sheer courage and unwavering determination. One of the most astonishing aspects of this story involves the tail section of the aircraft, which after the plane finally touched down, detached and crashed to the ground. What makes this even more remarkable is that this tail, unable to support the weight of even 3 curious ground crew members who approached it, had somehow managed to remain attached and functional during a 90-minute flight. This defied the very laws of physics, raising questions that have persisted for decades and transforming the incident into a haunting mystery that continues to intrigue aviation enthusiasts, historians, and veterans alike. This event endures as one of aviation's most compelling enigmas, symbolizing the boundless capacities of human resolve and ingenuity. It stands as a poignant reminder that human courage is not limited by the constraints of physical laws, but is often fueled by an indomitable spirit that refuses to accept defeat. When experts analyze the incident today, Aircraft engineers, military historians, and those who served in the war, they reach a unanimous conclusion. What happened defied all logical expectations. It simply should not have been possible. Nevertheless, the undeniable facts speak for themselves. Official records, photographs, and the eyewitness testimonies of ground crews and crew members all provide irrefutable evidence that this aircraft, despite its catastrophic damage, managed to return home, defying what everyone believed was physically feasible. The fact that such a rescue was even theoretically possible lies at the very heart of this story's enduring meaning, emphasizing that sometimes extraordinary outcomes emerge from seemingly impossible circumstances. Within this narrative lies a powerful lesson. In moments of extreme peril, when human lives are hanging precariously in the balance, ordinary individuals can accomplish extraordinary feats. These 10 young American men, flying a battered, broken aircraft over enemy territory, refused to accept the inevitability of defeat. Through their perseverance, unyielding determination, and refusal to surrender, they forged a legend, one that has been etched into the collective memory of history and will continue to inspire generations that remember the Second World War. The Germans, witnessing what appeared to be an impossible feat, were left stunned and incredulous when two B-17 bombers managed to fly in tandem, piggyback, across hostile skies. One aircraft was grievously wounded, almost dying, while the other was damaged but still fighting to survive. These Germans observed firsthand the remarkable capabilities of American engineering, the exceptional skill and professionalism of American airmen, and the unwavering tenacity that characterized their military efforts. This extraordinary event, these two aircraft flying together in such a manner, was nothing short of witnessing the impossible. It was a powerful testament to the resilience and ingenuity that defined American aerospace technology, as well as the indomitable spirit of those who operated these machines. Their actions, so audacious and unexpected, left no room for doubt. Even in the face of extreme adversity, the human capacity for resilience and innovation can push the boundaries of what is considered achievable. Thus, what the Germans observed on that day transcended mere military tactics. It became a symbol of hope, a vivid illustration that even in war's darkest moments, the courageous and the determined can achieve the extraordinary, rewriting what is accepted as achievable against all odds.